Yeah, if you're a die-hard New York bagel person, you probably will eat this and go, ah, this is more like a pretzel rather than a bagel. So, with that in mind, you can actually take that dough and turn those into like pretzel sticks, pretzel breadsticks, or make them really, really thin and actually like curve them so it actually looks like a baked pretzel, that kind of round crossed pretzel shape, and it will taste amazing. But it's so good. So the recipe that I found says that you need to use self-rising flour, and self-rising flour isn't something that I usually keep in the kitchen. I usually just keep like some bread flour for when I want to make things like focaccia, or just all-purpose flour. And so self-rising flour is all-purpose flour with a couple of little additions to it. So if you don't have any self-rising flour at home, all you need to use is, I've got a cup of regular all-purpose AP flour here, and you're going to add not baking soda, but you're going to add baking powder. Baking powder is different from baking soda. And you're going to add a teaspoon and a half of baking powder. Ooh, making a mess. You're also going to add a quarter teaspoon of just regular salt. And you're going to make sure that this is mixed really, really well, so you don't have any odd clumps of baking powder or salt. You're going to use a half cup of this self-rising flour mixture, so you're actually going to use half of the 1 cup that you've mixed together. And transfer it into this bowl. And you're going to save this for a different recipe, or you could actually use a little bit of it later when you're actually kneading the dough so it doesn't get all over your hands. To this, you are going to add a half cup of Greek yogurt. Now I use the 5%, you can use the 0%. The fat content is not what's important here. It's actually the acidity that's in the yogurt that comes in so helpful. Now a single serving cup of something like this faux is 5.5 ounces, and a half cup is actually 4 ounces, so you're actually only going to need a little bit less than the whole container. So just make sure that you're not using the whole container, because if you do, then you're going to end up with a bagel, faux bagel, pretzel dough that is waterier than what you want. On the other hand, because it's kind of a 1-to-1 ratio dough, you can actually measure out 5 ounces of flour, and then you can just use your entire container. But since different yogurt manufacturers have different sizes, it's easier to just say, okay, I'm just going to use half a cup and half a cup. And once those are combined in a bowl, you're gonna, I don't know, I usually start with a spatula just to kind of combine everything. I suppose that you can use like a flavored yogurt for this if you want to make like a blueberry flavored yogurt or a strawberry flavored yogurt. You can probably use a flavored yogurt for this, but just keep in mind that flavored yogurts usually have extra sugar as well. So if you're watching your sugar intake, watch out for that. If you aren't, not a problem. You see this kind of like, almost starts to look like a biscuit dough, how it's kind of crumbly, start coming together. Set that aside, and then you're gonna start kneading this. And it does start out pretty, it'll feel wet in your hands. You'll feel like it's not kind of like a regular dough. But as the flour starts to absorb the yogurt, it'll start coming together into one ball of dough. Once that's come together, you're actually going to let this sit for about 10 to 15 minutes. This doesn't have any yeast in it. This is a non-yeast dough. So you kind of want to make sure that the yogurt and the flour do get kind of combined, and the flour gets hydrated. It actually makes it a little bit better when you actually bake. So I'm going to let this sit for about 10-15 minutes. Going to get all this cleared up, and we're going to get ready for our next step, which is actually boiling these bagels. We'll be right back. So I've got a pot of steaming boiling water going, but before we actually put these bagels into this water, we're actually going to turn the water alkaline. And that's the thing that makes bagels so different from, well, pretzels and bagels, I guess, so different from regular breads, is that you're boiling it before you bake it, and you're boiling it specifically in this alkaline water, which traditionally involves the use of a chemical called lye, which is the same chemical you use for like hair relaxers back in the day, same as what like my grandfather used to make laundry soap. So it's a pretty caustic chemical. Most households don't keep it around. So the easiest way to make a super alkaline powder that you can use to make alkaline water to boil your bagels and pretzels in is to just bake baking soda. And so baking soda is sodium bicarbonate if you're a nerd like me. But if you bake it in the oven at like 250 degrees Fahrenheit for a whole hour, it turns the chemical composition of baking soda, sodium bicarbonate, into sodium carbonate without the bicarb. It becomes just a carb. So this is what we've done before. It's the color doesn't look any different, the texture doesn't look any different, but it's a sodium carbonate and not a sodium bicarbonate. So we're going to add a tablespoon of this to our pot of water. And that actually makes the water alkaline and drops the pH. Raises the pH. So you end up with this water that is going to help form this crust on the bread, the dough that you're going to put in there for a short while. So let me bring this back up to a boil. And while that's coming up to a boil, I'm going to go ahead and re-knead the dough that we've let sit for about 10-15 minutes. I'm going to add a little bit of flour to my hands just so it doesn't stick so much. And I think it's always a good idea to have a little bit of extra flour laying around because, humidity where you live is going to affect your dough. If it's humid outside, your bread dough is going to be a little bit stickier, so adding a little bit of flour to the surface and kind of reincorporating that can be helpful. If you're in a dry climate, you may not need to do this as much. And then you're going to break this into 2 portions. And then it's just a matter of shaping. So you can shape them into like sticks. So you're making like a pretzel-y, bagel-y breadstick. I am actually going to make, our traditional bagel shape by making them into balls and then using my finger and making a donut hole in the middle. And the other thing that I am doing while I am preparing these for baking is I've started the oven to preheat for 400 degrees because that's where these bagels will go after we're done boiling them. And they really only go for like 10-15 seconds. And all you're trying to do is to make this kind of alkaline crust on these bagels. And you'll see them float up to the surface, and they kind of change a little bit of color. They get a little bit kind of yellowy, pale yellow. After 15 seconds, you're going to flip them over. Personally, I don't mind that they're a little bit lumpy looking. I think that it kind of like adds the kind of rustic homemade feel. And once those are done boiling, see that they've actually puffed up a little too. Drain as much water off as possible. And you're going to put it on a baking sheet. And then these, you can actually top these with a little kosher salt. Or some everything bagel seasoning. Actually, I'm going to add it to both. And then I'm going to add a little bit of salt on the other one as well. These go into the oven for about 25 minutes. Around the 22-23 minute mark, you want to kind of check them and make sure that they're not burning. But usually 25 minutes is a good enough time for it to bake and get this like golden crust on top. So let me pop these in the oven. I'll be back in 25 minutes. So these are out of the oven and I've let them cool, and in the meantime the sun went down. But that everything bagel seasoning on top makes them smell so good. I'm gonna slice one open and let's do a little taste test. They definitely have that smell of freshly baked pretzels more than bagels. The bagel, the everything bagel seasoning on it definitely gives it that kind of like garlicky, oniony scent. But other than that, what I smell is this like kind of pretzely. It's amazing because there's no yeast in this, but yet it smells slightly yeasty. I'm gonna add a little bit of butter. One of the things I didn't have growing up in Japan are those freshly baked pretzels. Like we'd have access to like the hard, kind of like the bagged pretzels that you might get in like what you get on like planes these days, but not a soft baked pretzel. So that was something I really looked forward to when I would come to the States for like summer vacation. So this to me, I have a feeling is going to be more reminiscent of pretzels rather than bagels, but oh my god, it is so good. There's definitely that chew that is kind of bagely, but yeah, if you're a die-hard New York bagel person, you probably will eat this and go, this is more like a pretzel rather than a bagel. So with that in mind, you can actually take that dough and turn those into like pretzel breadsticks, or make them really, really thin and actually like curve them so it actually looks like a baked pretzel, that kind of round crossed pretzel shape, and it would taste amazing. But it's so good. Now, baking powder and the yogurt in the dough, excuse me, and the baking soda that's been baked and turned into a sodium carbonate, making that kind of alkaline water that you boil these in before you bake them, makes this kind of like, you know, like a pretzel-y kind of dark brown crust. If you want to even make this crunchier, you can add an egg wash to the top of these, which is like 1 egg plus 1 tablespoon of water. You mix that together, you kind of brush that on top. But I like this kind of soft pretzel-y faux bagel. So I'm going to call these pretzel bagels. And I bet these are really good with mustard. Perfect snack for like watching a baseball game on TV. Perfect in like a picnic basket. I hate to be punny about it, but this is a home run. If you're looking for like a pretzel-y bagel. Now, if you're looking for like a traditional New York style bagel, this might not exactly hit the spot, but it's still a tasty, tasty baked treat. I'm gonna keep chewing this. And I'll see you next time. Bye.